Next, we're going to remove the left damper assembly that will allow us to access the motor, also the reed sensor if we need to change that out. So we'll go through the process for removing the left damper, which is fairly straightforward. We have 2 screws holding in place. You lift up the left damper. You'll be able to freely move it now. There's just 2 screws, and then you'll be able to access the reed sensor. So to remove the reed sensor, there's 2 screws holding in the reed sensor. Then the wire goes right to the board, where it is labeled reed sensor. So you would simply remove the wire, remove the bracket, and then replace the reed sensor. To replace the motor, which we'll do next, we're going to go ahead and free up the motor. It's a little bit firm. You need to just have a little bit of strength. Use the lever to the side, but be careful because this is just a plastic piece. Once this has been, pressure's been relieved, then you can go ahead and remove the bracket. Unscrew the wire bracket. We've gone ahead and moved out the gear to separate it out from the motor. Be careful of our bearings. Ceramic bearings tend to fall off pretty easily, so we'll just keep these separate. And the motor disconnect from the board. That will allow you to work with the reed sensor here. If the reed sensor is fine, obviously that stays on, just be careful of it. And then the motor itself is secured with 3 screws. I'm going to go ahead and remove the end piece, and the motor should slide right out of the unit. So to secure your motor to the frame, you go ahead and line up your 3 screws. You can go ahead and set them in by hand at first. Just lightly tighten them before you set them in. You want to make sure these are very firmly secured. Then I put our plastic piece back on. We want to go ahead and line up as a flat side, so you want to line up the flat edge on both pieces. Give it a little firm press, and it should just press right on there for you. You want to go ahead and route the wire from the motor that's going to connect to the board underneath the motor. Otherwise it's going to be too short to reach. And then to get it bracket back on the frame, there's a raised ledge on these screw sets, and you really want to just push them till you hear a slight locking sound, a little click, and you'll know you have them in the right spot. Should balance pretty well when you hit the right spot. There we go. So the power cord is underneath. And then we'll set the frame. We've already gone ahead and connected the reed sensor back to the board. Now the motor connects back to the power board. The wires clear of everything. The wires, the reed sensor and all the wires are secured back to the board so that they're out of the way. And lastly, we're going to connect our dampers back. I'm going to put our bearings back on where they go. We're going to connect the gear drive back to the motor. Each end of the gear drive gets a bearing as well. It's easier to slide in the opposite end first. Then you're going to slide in the end you just repaired. So now we're going to connect the damper back. When the damper connects, you're not only going to line up the screw settings, the screw fittings to screw in, but you're also going to, this ridge on both sides is going to go into the frame. See, they slide right in. You want to make sure your bearings are lined up for this. If your bearings are falling off, like mine had, you want to replace those. There we go. So now it's seated. The bearings are lined up with a ridge on the back of the disc here, and then everything is seated. We're ready flush, ready to screw into the frame. And lastly, you want to adjust your gear to make sure it's flush and allow you to rotate. And that's it. That's how you access the left side to change the reed sensor and the motor if you need to.